Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lukonga Lindunda, and I'm Executive Director of Bongo Hive, also one of the co-founders. Our session today is quite close to my heart. I remember a few years back, we had a meeting at the University of Zambia, and I was told to follow one of the department heads there into a small room, and he showed me stacks and stacks and basically lots of files, and basically said, these are all the innovations that students have come up with, and how can we now get them to market? So this is a very serious challenge that we have, and also, quite frankly, a huge opportunity for us to be able to leverage on what so many great minds generate in our wonderful education system. And so on my panel today, I have Dr. Kelvin Kamfwa, who's a lecturer plant science at the University of Zambia. And we also have Benson Mpalo, who's the Deputy Registrar, Intellectual Property, Patents and Companies Registration Agency, PACRA. One of the panelists, Dr. Kasase, has had to attend to urgent matters and won't be joining us. But thank you all for making time to join us this morning. So the session today is focusing on our research institutions and universities. They are known for their role as centers of knowledge creation within a country's innovation system. However, it is even more crucial that transferring this knowledge must happen from research institutions into industries and companies to develop new products and services that benefit people and the planet. And so this session will explore how to strengthen this link between our research institutions and industry. And just two key takeaways for all of us by the end of the session. We hope that the roles of each organization and how they facilitate commercialization of research in Zambia will be much clearer. And also that some of the barriers and recommendations will be much clearer in how we facilitate this commercialization of research. I've done quite a bit of talking already, but I'll give chance to our panelists to introduce themselves. It's just 2 minutes each. We start with Dr. Kamfwa.
Right. Thank you very much, and I must thank you for inviting me to speak at this forum. So my name is Kelvin Kamfwa, and I'm a lecturer in the School of Agricultural Sciences in the Department of Plant Sciences. So besides being a lecturer there, I do quite a lot of research in plant breeding and genetics. I've been at the University of Zambia for the last, getting close now to about 6 years. So I look forward to sharing with you in terms of what my perspectives are as far as research is concerned, and how the opportunities and challenges that are there in terms of commercializing our research innovations.
Thank you. Benson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So my name is Benson Mpalo, as introduced already. I'm the Deputy Registrar at the Patents and Companies Registration Agency in charge of the Intellectual Property Department. So PACRA, as you may know, has the mandate to register business entities as well as to register intellectual property rights. So I'm here specifically to talk about the intellectual property aspects of PACRA. And the purpose why we have that mandate really is to provide incentives for innovation and creativity in the country. So that is what we will be focusing on in this today. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start off with one of the harder questions for Dr. Kamfwa. We know that Zambian universities and research institutions are good at producing academic papers. but not necessarily translating them into innovations. I like to say that this is also a great opportunity at the same time as it is a challenge. Dr. Kamfa, if you can just help us maybe understand the landscape a bit more. Why do you think this is the case? And based on that as well, maybe give a few examples of where you think we have succeeded at commercializing either by local or foreign firms, the actual research that's available in academic institutions.
Yeah, it's a question that makes quite a number of us uncomfortable, especially for us who are coming from the academia. Whenever you meet with people from the industry, they'll tell you that you guys are very good with what you are doing as far as publishing is concerned, but we don't seem to see you guys commercializing the research innovations that are coming out of your work. And yeah, they are correct to a larger extent. And that's the case for most of our African universities. It's not only the case for Zambia, maybe with a few exceptions. We do see that, which is okay in terms of publishing. But I think we have pivoted so much in terms of probably conducting basic research, which is important. I don't misquote me, very important. But to some extent at the expense of applied research, which is tend to be more useful to the industry. Again, this is part of the reason why you could see a lot more papers and maybe not so much in terms of these innovations being moved forward. We need to kind of have that, to create that difference between basic research and applied research, which both of them are very important for a university setup. But it's again the way the universities are structured as far as the reward system is concerned. And when I say reward system is how you are promoted through the hierarchy. You are promoted because you are publishing papers. Sometimes even if you have a major invention that's coming out of your work, if you don't publish, then you are not going to rise through the hierarchy. There is a common saying in academia to say, if you don't publish, then you perish. So you don't want to perish academically, so you invest quite a lot of your energies in terms of publishing papers. Now, it's just even not a question of publishing papers, it's the quality of those research which is leading into those outputs. I think that should be an area of concern. So how could we address that? It's very important the university continues to do the research, both basic and applied research. Like I said, the applied research is what is more appealing to the industry, whereas basic research is mainly just for within the inner group of the scientific community to satisfy some intellectual curiosity that is there, but that may not be very useful for the industry. So how do we strengthen the applied research aspect? Obviously, universities will require a lot more support, and this support has to come from the government itself. I think they have a major role to play in there, but also the industry who are interested in those innovations and even probably commercializing those innovations. They also have a major responsibility to support these universities. And when you go to these Western countries, I was privileged, I did my PhD in the US. You could see that both research, applied research and basic research, they run together. It's not like they're mutually exclusive to say when we embark a lot more on basic research, then you cannot do applied research. I think what just differs, it's in terms of the faculty in which you are and the nature of the research that you do, but both are very important for the university. You ask, and by the way, when you look at that applied research, it is a major source of funding for more research those universities in the Western countries too. But when you come to Africa, it's mainly just the basic research that is going on, and also to a larger extent, even sometimes question the quality of that basic research because obviously of poor infrastructure, the lack of funding, and generally not very enthusiastic, probably research community that is there. Are there some shiny examples? Yeah, it's not all gloomy. We do see innovations here and there once in a while. And I think a case in point, which we could look at, I was glad, was it February this year? I saw some memorandum of understanding being signed, is it by the ZRA and the Copperbelt University? That's an area where we've seen like a very tangible cooperation coming in there and co-creation of ideas. These two groups have tried to work together, and I think that has resulted in them developing some sort of an innovation as far as the tax management system is concerned, and that's very commendable. But that again just goes to show if there is a will on the part of the industry to take academia seriously as their partners, not only as partners in terms of the academia giving them the graduates that they need to be working within their industry, but seriously engaging with the academia in terms of how they can co-create ideas and develop, further develop these innovations that are coming out of there. If my recollection is well, I think that partnership, I saw ZRA, I think giving in excess of, is it 90 million kwacha towards the development of that software. And that's quite a good amount of money, which will go in even to further support the ICT research that is taking place there. We need to be seeing more of such partnerships, even to strengthen these partnerships further so that both the academia and the industry could benefit.
Quite a comprehensive answer there. On the panel, of course, we have Mr. Mpalo, who's from PACRA. There's definitely a role of legislation and policy frameworks in really enhancing this space. And, I'd be surprised like that Dr. Comfort didn't mention it, but, there's clearly an impact that could come from having a supportive framework that encourages private sector to play a bigger role in this. So I'm curious what your thoughts are around what that framework looks like in Zambia. Does it encourage innovation? Does it encourage participation of other players in supporting the transfer of this innovation to industry? And does it need to be changed and things like that? So if you could maybe enlighten us on that.
Okay, so we will start with the policy perspective in terms of commercialization of intangible assets in Zambia. So in 2010, government had formulated a policy on intellectual property. The policy was to run for 10 years from 2010 to 2020. Then along the way, somewhere in 2016, we undertook a review of that particular policy to see if it was still relevant to meet the set objectives. Now, one of the findings of that review was that the policy did not adequately cover, among other things, issues to do with commercialization, particularly with by universities, research institutions, and even SMEs. So arising from that finding, a review was done and we have developed a new policy on intellectual property rights, which has identified the need to commercialize intellectual property rights as one of the key objectives. So in terms of policy at the moment, yes, we have the policy framework, which is adequate. An implementation plan has been drafted and a number of activities have been identified, which are aimed at promoting commercialization of intangible assets. Now, coming to the legal framework, we have a number of statutes, intellectual property statutes, the Patents Act. We've got so many statutes, but there is no statute that specifically speaks to commercialization of intangible assets. In the implementation plan for the current revised intellectual property policy, there is a need to develop a legal framework for the commercialization and transfer of technology. So we are hoping that if the legal framework is established, then we should be able to speak and speak convincingly about issues of intellectual property rights and commercialization of intangible assets.
In this process itself, some of the challenges that people point out are the silos that are created in that, what PACRA or academia will be doing sometimes in most cases doesn't involve private sector. So I'm curious what your intervention looks like in terms of how you plan to collaborate with other players, particularly outside the usual academia space and other regulatory agencies. There are definitely a lot more private sector players that want to be involved in this space, but I'm curious how you plan to reach a broad range of stakeholders in coming up with the appropriate policy framework.
Okay, so when the policy framework was being developed, one of the issues that we identified as being a challenge is the lack of coordination and collaboration among key stakeholders. So the policy has clearly spelled out how we will be able to enhance collaboration among the key stakeholders. So we will be embarking on a number of sensitization programs, and we have identified quite a number of key partners that we work with in that space. So yes, I do agree with you that collaboration is critical, and we need to ensure that we work together with key partners to ensure that we start speaking the same language.
Thank you for that. Dr. Kamfo, we know that universities across the world are translating their basic research into technology-oriented output. You spoke about incentives for lecturers and how that assists them in focusing a lot more on applied research. So I'm also curious what kind of support you think Zambian research institutions need to successfully commercialize their research. Are there specific steps, specific items that you think would accelerate this process, and what are those?
Yeah, incentives are very important for academia to be motivated and to continue innovating. And that's an area where I think in African countries, we haven't done very well. Because in other places, once you attract a huge, research fund, you are guaranteed for a longer period of time that you are going to be getting returns. And returns, I mean, reinvesting into research to be able to pay your technicians, to be able to pay your students and postdocs for the entire, group of people who work for you. Sometimes, yeah, there is a bit of a challenge because when those, if at all you're bringing in money, it's not very clear in terms of how much of that actually money will trickle down to the scientist, him or herself, and won't just end up caught up in the administrative issues. So that can be a little bit of a frustration in terms of, the researchers are continuing to engage in research. And what is it that we can do? I think we need to have deeper relationships with the industry. In my case, like I said, I'm a plant breeder, and we've seen so many opportunities that could come out of there if we engage with the industry. And let's be clear, the industry is willing to engage with the University of Zambia and indeed many other universities. But we need to show, you need to prove to them that we have these innovations that might be very useful and profitable. They can monetize those innovations for their benefit and also for the benefit of the universities. Not until we can convince the industry, then they are only going to look at us to say, well, that's the academia, they can do their research, but we don't look up to them in terms of innovations that we can monetize or make money out of it. So for us to kind of move away from that narrative, we need to have deeper conversations and more serious engagements with the industry for them to take us seriously. How can we do that? One way in which to do that is to kind of provide a forum where you could go into these collaborative research partnerships, where the industry come and tell you exactly what they are looking for in terms of the technologies. They know very well, they are the people who are in there. And then they'll tell you, this is what we are looking for. These are the avenues for us. We probably could partner and you could develop these technologies for us. And the university does provide for such avenues. It could be through consultancy. It could be through contract research, where an industry could come to the university and make very specific requests. We want ABCD. Can we co-create, conceptualize the ideas together and then see what comes out of that? So in other places, you could have these what are called the industry university research centers, which is the right platform, to compare and share notes and really look at what the industry could be looking at. So we need to be strengthening that. At University of Zambia, you've heard of, I think, the Technology Advisory Unit, which is called the TDAU. One of the reasons that unit was created is exactly to try and, service these SMEs, which could be, among other things, of course, they do, where people could walk into the university and try and see how the university could help them with very specific technological requirements that they might be interested in. If given funded well and better management, that's another avenue which could help us collaborate with the industry, and that way have a better shot in terms of commercializing the innovations that are coming out of the university to take them to the industry. But we need that deeper relationships. And like I said, I've seen the industry, the private sector, has been coming to the university. I myself, I collaborate with the industry. I work with them quite a lot. And yeah, there are some people in the audience there, such as Good Nature, which is a seed company. I tend to collaborate with them very intensely in terms of what we do. And because they have seen or they have realized that indeed there's something positive that can come out of the universities. We need more players to come into that in terms of partnerships and see how we can harness the best brains that are the University of Zambia. No doubt about it. We are very smart people there, well funded, well supported. I think so many innovations could come out of there.
So when we look at just the last statement you have made, which is that people are there, the minds are there. A question now to Mr. Mpalo is the process now that takes place when people are beginning to think about applying for an IP or a patent. Could you take us through that process? That way it can enlighten us on some of the opportunities maybe that are missed in that process. And also there may be other academics on Zoom and other places that are looking to really understand how they can commercialize IP. Apart from that as well, there are many students that go through a number of programs at universities. Is it clear to them how they can actually register their IP and how they can get support in this process? So just enlighten us as well on the process of IP registration and patenting in Zambia, and how this process can be maybe enhanced for the average person on the street. Yeah.
Okay, maybe before I even respond to your question, Mr. Moderator, let me speak about one thing that Dr. Kamfa alluded to, the challenges that universities face in terms of commercialization of research results. So he stated that in terms of incentives, what they think of most of the time is a publication of their research results. And once it is published, it's end there. It ends just there. So what we have seen from the policy perspective as a problem is that there is no further incentive for researchers to protect their intellectual property rights, their research results, and further to commercialize that research. So if there could be a change in the way promotions are thought about within the universities and research institutions, perhaps things can start looking bright, so that if protection of intellectual research results is also made as a criteria for promotion, commercialization of research is also set as a criteria for promotion, then we'll be able to see a number of research results going into the markets. Now, answering your question on the processes, the procedures that are available for one to register their research results, it will depend on whether what you want to register is a patent, is it a trademark, an industrial design, or indeed a copyright. The process involves you filling out a form and paying the requisite fees. So once that is done, you lodge the application with the registrar, and then the registrar will examine the application, give you an acceptance letter if you meet the requirements that are set by law. And then thereafter, you'll be required to publish your acceptance. It will run in the Gazette for 2 months. If there is no objection, then you can come forth and register your intellectual property results. Now, after registration, then you are free to do that which you can do with that particular research. You can license, assign your research results. You can use that as collateral to obtain a loan, or you can even think of commercializing your research results. So in a nutshell, that is the procedure that you have to follow. It's a process of you filling out a form, paying the requisite fees, and so forth. In terms of resources which are available for researchers or students, often we publish booklets and brochures, which are basically resources that guide in the application process. But also, you will be able to find most of the information on our website. WIPO also has got a comprehensive publications, which will give you useful information on what constitutes intellectual property rights and the processes that you need to go through for you to register your IP rights. Thank you.
If I may just ambush you just there, I came across a statistic around the actual research output or IP registrations in Zambia compared to the rest of the world. I'm not sure if you have that statistic, but it would be good to know where we are now and if there's been progress made over the past years and where we hope to be, just in terms of the targets for research output and IP registrations and other forms of registrations at PACRA.
So I'll start with patents. In the area of patents, as you may know, the level of inventiveness of a country depends on the number of patents that are filed. So you'll be able to measure how creative, how inventive your people are by looking at the number of patents that are being filed with the National IP Office. Unfortunately for Zambia, we've got very little patents that are filed by research institutions or universities. On average, we receive in a year about 10 Zambian applications, and most of those applications do not emanate from research institutions. So there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of creating awareness, in terms of making researchers understand that the objective should not merely be about publication. They must also go beyond that and protect their research results, and then thereafter they can think about commercializing their research. So we do not have much patent applications coming from our researchers here in Zambia.
And if you were to benchmark that, my last question on this point, if you were to benchmark us against Rwanda or South Africa, how are they doing? Just to give us a sense of where we are in comparison with other regional countries here.
Well, in Africa, I think the problem is almost the same, apart from, say, South Africa, where they are doing quite a lot. There are so many applications that are coming from research institutions in South Africa as compared to the rest of Africa. In sub-Saharan Africa, the trend is almost the same. Very little applications are coming from our own people. At PACRA, we have more applications that we register from foreign applicants as opposed to local applications.
So certainly a huge challenge that we are facing. And I'll go back to Dr. Kamfa there and presented with this particular challenge, which of course you are very aware of. How can university programs encourage a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship? I know you talked about incentives there for lecturers, but what, from a perspective of a student and other stakeholders like that, how can we encourage them to be more innovative, to begin to generate the right type of research outputs, innovations that would, of course, increase our numbers, but make us a lot more innovative as a country?
Yeah, and maybe just even to further discuss what Mr. Mpalo has said, in terms of very few patents that are being filed there. I mean, it's indicative of how weak our research system is in general as a country. And in terms of why we need even to be serious, it could be, I mean, on the part of the university itself in terms of generating internal revenue to support research, or in the case of public universities, why there is need for, I think, government to allocate more research funds to there, unlike just paying salaries. You're not going to get research outputs if we are putting so much emphasis on teaching. Yes, teaching is a very important pillar for the university. Universities traditionally are supposed to teach and conduct research. That's their two primary mandates. But more often we see that we concentrate so much on teaching. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, that's very important, but we negate the other very important pillar, which is research. And that's why we end up not having these many patents going to PACRA. You speak of the case of South Africa. South Africa, I mean, they are putting quite a lot of money. You look at the amount of money that goes into UCT University of Cape Town. They are putting in a lot of rands into there, millions of rands in terms of supporting the research, because they have realized in terms of what those facilities can do. They have the best brains, and if those best brains well-natured and supported, there are so many things that they can do with that. Again, it's even the nature of the way we have here, whereby you are appointed most of the times as a lecturer, and teaching takes quite a lot of amount of your time. In other places, such even in the Western countries or in North America, you can be actually working at a university and only have less than even 20% of your teaching time. The rest of your 80% actually is spent on research. When you know that you are spending that amount of time on research, you want to be serious with what you are doing, because some outputs have to come out of there. But here, as long as you are spending so much time on teaching, I think that's what you're going to be evaluated based upon. And in the end, people just don't see the incentive of doing that. Can we please go to the culture whereby even those, you know, who are the best brains in terms of research could be supported and be able to be promoted based on their research outputs? And then that would be more useful in terms of engaging even deeper research. So as a country, I think we need to invest in a lot more. We need to incentivize these research scientists who are working in these facilities and support them. Now, how can we make, and that research mainly is driven by the graduate training program. Normally, it's the grad students who drive the research. If you hear a vaccine has been developed by University of Oxford, it's mainly the grad students who are behind that and the postdocs. The people who are driving that, plus, of course, the undergraduate here and there. How strong is our graduate training program in Zambia? Probably not so strong. And that again, you know, translate into us not just having very good research outputs. So we need to fund the research by providing a lot more money to research. Then we are going to have a lot more of these master's students being trained, a lot more people being trained in PhD. I think the Vice Chancellor for the University of Zambia a few years ago, Dr. Jacob Mwanza, bemoaned there's so many few people graduating with PhDs from the University of Zambia. And again, it's because that again is indicative of how weak the research system is, because if you had a very vibrant research system, then we could be seeing more of that. So what do we need? We need to support those who are already doing the research. Let's uplift them, let's support them further, and then let's encourage these students. That way the students will be motivated even to stay in academia. And if we could retain the best brains in academia, people are very enthusiastic about science, then we are going to see a lot more research outputs coming out of there. There has been a push in terms of incorporating entrepreneurial skills, which is very important, because we need to be having these students who could be attaching value to the science that they are doing and be able to see opportunities. And again, you know, once you bring in these entrepreneurial skills, the industry has to be there to support these students, to give them, I think, a bit more internships. That way they can kind of change their mindset, so that when these kids at the university, they have at least that entrepreneurial brain and see opportunities that are there in terms of the research that they are doing, hoping that one day, whatever they are working on in their research laboratories, those things could find themselves, you know, on the market. It's just not a question of patenting, but it's what are you patenting? Because it's expensive to maintain that patent. It's just not for fun to say, I have 5 patents, so what? You know, those patents have to be useful. And the industry is not going to be interested in that if they don't see a use or are not able to monetize that patent. So it requires serious investment into research to come up with these great innovations which the industry could see value in, and then you could patent that. When you have reached that point, then there could be discussions. And right now the challenge is, even if you came up with a good idea, there's no research funds or commercialization funds, so to say, that could support that. And here I would advocate, I think it's important for the universities to have specially dedicated funds, you know, to support these commercialization, where they see really, really bright ideas. That's not the case at the moment. As a scientist, you are by yourself to look at how you can patent that. And how much money it costs, it's very expensive to do that. Then it just doesn't give you incentive to go on that path.
Now that we are in the room with investors, or even the virtual room with investors, I'm also curious, Dr. Kamfwa, if there are specific opportunities for people that say, I have money, I'm looking for opportunities, I'm willing to have a conversation with you. Are there opportunities right now that you could say are closer to market? Are there specific areas within the university where you think you have made much more progress, and maybe they are much more willing now to talk to external players like investors? Is that the case right now at UNZA?
Yeah, like I said, I've seen quite a lot of goodwill coming from the industry, at least in the area where I work in. I'm a plant breeder by profession, so I develop varieties. If you are looking for varieties of beans or soybeans, that's my profession, is to recreate a variety which is resistant to diseases. There's things that could give you a lot more yield. That's my profession. I'm a geneticist. So I play around with the genome to make sure that we make better crops, better varieties in the case of beans and soybeans. And when you are doing what is good, and you are very focused on what you are doing, you always attract attention from the industry because they are interested in these things that we are doing. I gave a case in point of Good Nature Agro. Their chief executive was here, Carl Jensen was there. We've managed to partner, and because they have realized that there is something that could come out of that partnerships. And right now we are very confident in terms of what could be coming out of that partnerships. And we need a lot more of that on different commodities and in different areas of research. So there is goodwill on the part of the industry. But you know what? When an investor comes, like the case of Good Nature, these guys, they know what they want. They have to monetize or make money out of their investments that they are making. So also in your case, you are driven by that. You know that you have to be serious in terms of how you are engaging with them. But there are opportunities. The industry is willing to come and pick up your brains, or they are willing to partner with you if you can convince them that indeed you have something to offer to them. So we need, as a university, to start interfacing a lot more with the industry in our own individual capacities as scientists or researchers there, but also at an institutional level. Let there be that platform which could be taken advantage of by the industry for us to co-create ideas. Like I said, we've seen that happening for CBU. They are making quite good money out of their ICT thing.
I'm really glad that there's a very specific example of a startup or SME within this room that's managed to partner with you. I think those are real opportunities for us to look at and be able to replicate for many of us in the room. We will open up for questions now. If there's any question that you have, both online and also in this room, please feel free to raise your hand. We have a great panelists here that will be able to address your question.
My name is Basil Nunwe, and I'm from Inside Capital Partners. I'm just curious whether it is possible, or it's been considered, to direct your research towards solving the question of importation. Does it make sense to try, for Zambia, for example, to try and look at the areas where we're hemorrhaging the most, on what we're importing the most into the country, and then try and direct your efforts on research to address that problem, so you produce products that you stop importing? So a simple import substitution play. Pharmaceutical industry, I think, is a big one. So in my mind, I don't know if it would make sense to analyze, where do we spend most of the money? You want to encourage impact. Where do we spend the most of the money? Why do we not try and produce whatever it is locally that we tend to buy most of from the outside?
Thank you, Mr. Nundwe. Dr. Comfort, did you hear the question?
I agree with you entirely. We consume a lot in terms of products from outside. You could see you just have to, you don't need to go very far. You go into a grocery store, you see that's the case. Sometimes I even get upset personally because I've seen beans of everything, sugar beans, importing it all the way from South Africa. I went in a grocery store, I won't mention it for obvious reasons. I looked at the label, they said grown in China, repackaged in South Africa, and then we see it on the Zambian shelves. And that's beans, not very difficult crop to grow. You get the small scale farmers, they could grow that for you. And you wonder in terms of how many rands we have to spend and give to the South African, to support their repackaging there and ultimately support the Chinese guys, to grow that crop. Yet, can we fail to grow this? That's not very difficult. There's no rocket science there for you for failure to do that. So that's a low-hanging fruit, which I could give an example. I hate that when I go on these. So we have a responsibility, I think, as a country to really invest. It could be in these technological innovations, which could feed into the manufacturing industry, and then we start producing for most of these things that we are consuming. And but all that requires, a lot of policy in terms of supporting that and curtailing the importation of some of these commodities, which we are able to grow on our part. And that requires, obviously, to support the research. Sometimes, again, I understand the industry could be a little bit careful because they are not guaranteed in terms of the results that could be coming out of their research investments. I know research is expensive, and sometimes people could be wary in terms of what would be the return on their research investments. We need to prove ourselves as academia that we could put to good use that those research investments coming in our way. So yes, we need to invest in technological innovations to be able to actually produce some of these products locally, and that could be more helpful to our economy, especially with all this craziness happening with these diseases such as COVID-19. This has really taught us one lesson, that it's important we are self-sufficient in terms of producing some of these things that we consume, unlike importing them from outside.
We are about to close this session. If we can have just some closing remarks from the panelists. Mr. Mpalo, we'll start with you in closing remarks for the audience.
Thank you so much. So for us from PACRAB, our job is to ensure that we promote innovation and creativity. And how do we do that? By facilitating the registration of intellectual property assets. And apart from that, we also ensure that we've got the right legal framework, the right policy framework for us to be able to achieve that purpose. In terms of the legal framework, we have a perfect legal framework, a very strong and robust intellectual property system that can enhance creativity and innovation in the country. It is up to our colleagues, all the stakeholders from the research fraternity, to seize the opportunity and ensure that they look beyond publication of their research results and think of commercializing their research results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mpalo. Dr. Kamfo?
Yeah, and once again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak here, especially actually to interface with the rest of the public out there. And Mr. Mpalo has given us a very good challenge. Hopefully, the next time I can meet him, I'll be at PACRA office trying to patent something. That would be great. And how is that going to happen? I think it's important that research first is well funded at the universities, particularly public universities. We need to be creating these special research funds, and also special funds for commercialization. And then we need to have a deeper engagement with the industry, the private sector. We know there are the people who have the know-how, who have the, the marketing ingenuity, to take whatever innovation we have actually onto the market. Sometimes as scientists, we could be buried into there, into our own world, and not really have that skills to monetize what we are working on. I think the private sector are very good at that. But again, we need the industry us to believe in what the academia can do. People at these universities, like I said, those are some of the best brains, no doubt about it. Very well trained, very competent guys. if well supported. But there is a way to look at universities to say, well, they'll train people who come and work for me, not really to engage them in terms of co-creating ideas. That's not fair. I think there has to be that deeper engagement, both, you know, them trying to train the people who are going to work for your companies, for your industry, but also going into meaningful research partnerships. And the narrative has to change, you know. There's this narrative where you think a scientist has to be some guy in a white lab coat, tiny glasses, and, you know, probably in a different skin color. And then you'll have more confidence into that guy. When you look at a guy like me who's not in a lab coat, probably you are like, well, even you are a scientist, they'll second guess you in terms of what you are capable of doing, which is a shame. I think it's important we believe in the competence that we have in these universities in terms of their capabilities. That's very important, and for us to support them. And that support could be coming, you know, through stronger partnerships with the universities. But again, Zambia research has to be funded by the Zambian, you know, stakeholders themselves. This could be the government, or this could be the private sector, the industry. We need to make those research investments. And we've seen the power of research. If we were nurtured, there are so many things, positive things that could come out of there, positive innovations which could be monetized and be able to make money. But we need to invest in there. And sometimes research can be wasteful in terms of resources, you know, but we need to be patient and be able to fund both, you know, basic research, but even apply research to a larger proportion, because that's the one that could create more tangible benefits, which the industry could be interested in. But as Zambians, I think we better start taking research seriously and what potential benefits that it could provide to us.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the session was on commercializing scientific research to harness emerging technology and innovations for impact. And our panelists were Dr. Kelvin Kamfwa, who's the lecturer of plant science at the University of Zambia, and Mr. Benson Mpalo, who's deputy registrar at PACRA. My name is Kongalin Dunda, co-founder and executive director of Bongo Hive, and I was your moderator. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the session was on commercializing scientific research to harness emerging technology and innovations for impact. And our panelists were Dr. Kelvin Kamfwa, who's the lecturer of plant science at the University of Zambia, and Mr. Benson Mpalo, who's deputy registrar at PACRA. My name is Kongalin Dunda, co-founder and executive director of Bongo Hive, and I was your moderator. Please give the panel a hand.